Welcome to this episode of Kingology. We host Mark and Talicia. Hi, Talicia.
Hi, Mark. How you doing?
Not bad. We finally come back to talk about the second part of Skeleton Crew. We've been a bit slow doing these, but it's my fault, I think, because I've deliberately slowed things up because I want to try and coordinate. So the movie version of it kind of coordinates with the discussion of the book and the miniseries. So that's it's all my fault, really. But it's gone to plan, and I'm kind of pleased, and I'm currently getting through it again, which is my favourite King book, actually. So, I've been really looking forward to that. However, Skeleton Crew, it's got to be discussed first. And there's a lot of gold in Skeleton Crew too, so I'm kind of looking forward to talking about that. Now, last time we talked, we discussed, I think it was 10 stories from the Skeleton Crew. We didn't talk about the Mist. Well, sorry, you and I did talk about it very briefly, but there was a separate podcast on Kingology for the Mist, but we covered 10 next stories, and now we're going to cover the last, I think, 11, right? Last 11, or not stories. One of them's a poem, so 10 stories and a poem. Let's jump straight into it. The next one on the list was Beach World. What's your feeling on this?
Well, I mean, it was interesting because the second half of stories really kicked off for me, and this one was really, it did. I mean, it's like it suddenly just took off. I really, really liked Beach World. I kind of liked it was the thing about King, his style of writing, that I've now come to be familiar with, that I didn't catch as much in the first set of the first half, was the, how tangible things are. It's like I was actually feeling thirsty reading Beachland, like the sand and the heat and everything that he was describing, and really interesting foray into the science fiction side of horror. So that was my impression of it.
Yeah, I kind of liked it. It's interesting that he doesn't often do science fiction, does he? But I kind of dig it when he does. It's a bit like he doesn't often do certain types of genre, but when he does, it's kind of interesting. I really like some of his more straight drama in his first collection. For example, the Last Ring on the Ladder remains my favourite short story of his, and there's nothing supernatural in that at all.
Right.
This story reminded me a lot of another story, which I think was in the Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury, was it? That collection where some astronauts land on a planet where all it does is rain. I think it's Venus actually in that story, but basically the rain starts to get to them and get everywhere. This felt like a distinct nod to that story, and in many ways it was kind of Bradbury-esque actually. Yeah, I mean, it was set on this planet. It's set in the future at some point. I think at one point they talk about there's a reference to a Beach Boys song being thousands of years ago. So they're set in the middle future, I guess. And I kind of was taken a little out of it when the physical stuff started the sand actually started moving and stuff, because it was I liked it better when it was all psychological and you didn't know if it was just the sheer psychological pressure of all that sand.
True. Yeah.
But no, it worked for me in the end. I quite like this one. It was kind of cool. Did you have any downside, or was it just good for you?
Well, I think just, again, it was a shifting gears. So I had to go from a more, I guess, horror-esque, of course, with the Mist too, it was very mythological, not just horror, but it was very Lovecraftian with monsters and everything. And so it was a bit of a different, shifting gears to try to get into the spirit of the story, get my head into it. So, and, of course, there were certain things, like you said, with the moving sand, but for me, I think it was actually the Beach Boys reference. Yeah. It's one of those things where you can tell these stories are a bit dated, because obviously this would be, King, being a baby boomer himself, is going to reference a lot of popular music from his generation. And, then it's why would the Beach Boys survive for 1,000 years? It's maybe they would. Yeah, sure. Why not? But I mean, that was, what was being called into mind by these two, I guess, astronauts or space explorers. And then, there was a bit of callback to space scavengers, kind of Firefly type character at the end. Yeah. And I just kind of felt like maybe this was a story. I just wondered if this was something that he would explore at a later time, and I don't know if he ever did, because that scavenger character in the beach world and all of that just kind of seemed like a starting point for a series. I mean,
yeah, indeed. I think you're right. Could not something I'd actually considered, but yeah, I think that's a very good point. It's interesting that in this series, this is another story where people are in an isolated spot and having to deal with it and each other. In many ways, it's similar sort of kind of story to sort of Night of the Living Dead. You know, the isolation and working against each other is what gets you in the end, kinda. It was very similar in some ways to say The Raft or The Mist. In that respect. So, I thought this was a solid one. It wasn't exceptional, but I kind of enjoyed it. I think it would have worked just as well if he had, the sand hadn't been a giant arm and stuff like that. In many ways, that kind of undercut it a little. But it was fine. It was fine. And as I say, I wish I could remember the name of the story, but I'm pretty sure it's in the Illustrated Man collection. And as I say, it's about astronauts stuck in a place where all it does is rain, and it's the rain that gets to them. In this, it's the sand, right? This book also reminded me a little of Dune. In the book of Dune, there's this like dryness and lack of water, and the constant sand is a major psychological factor in the people that live on that planet, and it kind of made me think of that too a little.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the next one. The next one, this is much more sort of straightforward supernatural. The Reaper's Image. This was first published in 1969, a fairly old one, in a collection called The Startling Mystery Stories. So this is all about like this antique mirror where people think they see something and then something bad happens to them. This really felt EC Comics like to me.
I instantly thought of the Oculus when I was reading.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a good catch. Not one I thought of. It reminded. I'm sure there's a very similar story in one of the Amicus horror movie, the anthology series. There's definitely one about a mirror with strange effects. And it made me think of that. And that film would have been out in around 1969, I reckon. So it may have even come after 1969. I'm not saying King was copying or stealing from it, but it was very, very similar in many ways. I love the amount of detail he puts into this.
Yeah.
Considering how young he was, it's kind of amazing. It's all again. I always come back to this. He can make stuff feel authentic. He just does it. It's amazing.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I would agree with that for sure. I mean, it just kind of like, again, he's definitely a master at getting you into the spirit of the story. Like whatever the overarching mood of that particular story is, like with Beach World, it was the sense of isolation in a hot, dry place. And here it's like you're in dusty, dank archives with this very surly archivist who's taking was he a journalist? I can't remember now. It was a little while when I read it. So
yeah, I can't remember either, but it was people commenting on it and then sort of being drawn into it. In many ways, it reminded me of sort of M.R. James's, some of M.R. James's story. There's a particular story that I'm not sure is that famous called The Mezzotint.
That's right.
It kind of reminded me of that.
I thought of that too. Yeah, I did. I kind of had made that connection. I was like, this was very, like, it had a more, because the whole thing of a scholar, forbidden knowledge, and all of that. I mean, it's definitely playing with a lot of those themes in this too.
Yeah, it's again pretty decent. It's not like my favourite or anything like that. I'm just having a quick look up of what Amicus film I'm talking about. Right, it's called From Beyond the Grave, the anthology I was thinking of, and it was made in 1974, so 5 years after this came out. So there's definitely not a sense of copying there. If anything, it's the other way around. But it appears to be. Let me find this specific story. It's called The Gatecrasher. And it's about someone, a purchaser of an antique mirror antique collector who buys it at a knockdown price by conning someone, which feels a bit also Roald Dahl. I'm sure Roald Dahl's got similar stories of that vein in his Tales of the Unexpected and collections. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to find who wrote that story, but it just seems to be script writers. It's not borrowing from anyone, it appears, but I'll have to research into it to be sure. So this story, mirrors are kind of spooky. We know about people used to tell fortunes through mirrors and this, as well as sort of crystal balls. And there's always this sort of thing of talking to another dimension, possibly through mirrors. And this kind of works on that level, right? Something's coming to get you.
Well, and I have an anecdote too related to that. Is like if you ever go to Louisiana and you visit some of the plantation homes, one in particular that's supposed to be the most haunted house in America is called the Myrtles. And an old folk belief was that one of the reasons that people covered mirrors when someone died in the house is they didn't want the soul to get trapped in the mirror and be stuck in limbo. Well, apparently somebody missed one of the mirrors in the mirror during a death, and allegedly there's a ghost in the mirror, and you can go, and if you take a picture, you might see somebody standing behind you in the mirror. So that's just something to keep in mind. That, of course, I was playing around with those ideas when I was Oculus as well. So
I have to say, I'm a very rational person. I like to think I am, but whenever I hear a story like that, it does make my skin crawl a little. I just can't help it. It's kind of delicious though, it's fine.
Oh yeah.
Okay, let's get on to that. So we both kind of like that one too. Let's get on to the next one. Nona. This was first published in an anthology in 1978 called Shadows. That was the anthology, and then obviously put it to Skeleton Crew. Now I don't think I said at the beginning, but Skeleton Crew was published in 1985, so that gives you an idea of the age. I again really like this one. In fact, I used to. I do write now and again, and I do remember writing the short story that was similar in nature to this. Of someone seeing someone who may be there or maybe not. You're never quite sure, and it kind of made me think of that. But that's enough self promotion. So this man encounters this beautiful girl. Called Nona, and they're kind of aimlessly wandering around, but she kind of induces him to act murderously ultimately, right? And there's this refrain which is "Do you love? Do you love?" comes through it. It had a number of links to other stories to me. I mean, I particularly thought of things like well, actually I haven't got to the end of it yet. At the end he kind of, we're not sure if it's madness or supernatural, really, are we? What was your feelings on that?
Well, I think with a lot of the flashbacks that he kind of like were highlighting throughout his trip, I kind of wondered if she was something of a manifestation of, he's a young man basically on the outside of society in a lot of ways. He's a foster kid. He was a college scholarship, so he's not with the well-heeled to-do who go to college, and he's always kind of defending himself because, with the long hair, all of these, surly types are kind of picking on him constantly. So it's almost like he's had this rage inside of him all this time that's now just sort of manifesting itself. And, there's a parallel story between, his relationship with Nona, and then, of course, when he faced the town bully because of, a conversation that he had with the bully's girlfriend. Yeah. So it's almost like, there's definitely a parallel there. So I kind of understood it to be that way, but you're right. I mean, it's, the way it plays out, it's like that whole, because that whole story or theme of the killer couple, which is something that, we see a lot in society, and we don't see it too much in horror stories for some reason, or at least I haven't. But there are a lot of real life examples of killer couples. And they're just kind of creepy. They're just kind of a scary idea that, I think with Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, he came to the conclusion that individually none of these men could have committed the act themselves, but together they, together they kind of like, I guess, encouraged one another or fed into one another's psyche to the point that they could commit murder. So it's kind of like I wondered if maybe in his own mind he created this character of Nona to, to do something he always wanted to do, but never had the, I guess, the wherewithal to do himself. But when you get to the end, you don't really know. Yeah, you're right. It's
Yeah.
like this was fabrication, or was there something else going
I
on?
I
Yeah. So,
think the one of the hints that it could be madness is the fact he mentions the this event with the town bully Ace Merrill. It has to be said from the story The Body, and his girlfriend Betsy. He does say that she looks a bit like Nona, doesn't he? There
yeah,
is a mention she looks a bit like Nona, so that's kind of a suggestion that his mind's fabricated this character of this girl that actually talked to him, and
yeah,
she kissed him as well at one point, doesn't she?
right.
But again, if it's supernatural, it could be picking from his mind and constructed it. So it's kind of very difficult. It takes a very weird turn as well, doesn't it? With the sort of the stuff about the rat, the giant rat. Just that came from nowhere, and I assume that's King's muse, doing its thing.
Yeah,
Sometimes it takes him into a place that, as a reader, it's like, oh, I wish that hadn't have happened.
right.
But yeah. I liked it. I also felt the ending where he's in the. I think he's in. He's been found insane, and he can hear a scratching in the walls. Was very reminiscent of Lovecraft's Rats in the Walls
Yes.
kind of ending, and some of Poe's stuff maybe as well. So that was kind of cool. I liked it. It felt the ending was a real left turn for me, but it was kind of cool. Again, it's got that authentic feel. This lonely, possibly insane person doing all this stuff. But an whole image of a horrible rat giving birth and all of that. And that again harked back to a story that was in the first collection, which I can't remember what it was. Its name was, but it was a crew that was charged with clearing out the basement of like a laundry.
Yeah.
And finding like weird mutant rats. So there was like it connected to that for me. Not bad though. I believe this was made into a film, but I couldn't track it down. And I can't remember if it was a Dollar Baby. I remember some details. I believe it was a short rather than a film,
Right.
but not in like something like Tales from the Crypt or anything like that. Just made as a short, probably by a film student. I wouldn't have minded seeing it just to see how they treated the material, but like I said, I couldn't track it down. So again, not bad. What was your feeling on it? Just to check.
My feeling on it, yeah, I did enjoy it. I mean, it was, again, I thought it was kind of creepy, very, like the whole thing with Nana. It's like, what is she? It's like it is very mysterious. She remains mysterious throughout and you don't question that she's real at first, and then you're like, well, was she? And maybe she was, and maybe she actually did exist in some sort of supernatural, or maybe she was just a manifestation of his rage. Maybe she was somebody that he killed. I mean,
it's possible. It's when the people in charge sort of saying, "What girl?" What,
yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff like that. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next one. This one wasn't a story; it was a poem for Owen. So that's his son's name. So a poem, a very fairly short poem. I think it says 30, in Wikipedia. It says 34-line, 3-verse poem. It's about his son walking to school and sort of seeing stuff and seeing. He goes to this like a school where it's fruit. The people in the school are fruit, pieces of fruit and stuff. What do you think of this one?
Well, I had to kind of go back and listen to, and of course it's an audio book, but I had to kind of go back and listen to this one again to kind of, because it was so short and I had kind of gotten lost in the stories. But yeah, I mean, I think it was just him, just as a father to his son, kind of imagining where his son is at this stage in his life and what he has to look forward to as he grows into a man. I mean, that's kind of what I thought of it, but I'd like to hear what your take is on it.
I looked at it fairly superficial, and yeah, it's kind of sweet. I kind of like the vibe. I can see kids seeing things this way, and it kind of made sense to me from that point of view. But I didn't take anything else from it, really. I thought it was sweet, but no more, really. Fairly fluff to me. I mean, let's be honest, we don't read King for his poetry, do we?
Sure.
We read for his prose. Okay, let's just go past that one. I have to say, all of these ones, most, if not all of the ones in this half of the collection are very solid, and I think we've kind of affirmed that with the first three we've talked about. Anyway, to get on to the next one, number 16 in this was Survivor Type. This one was the one I remembered most, I think, from this collection. Coming back to it, it's a very distinctive one, isn't it? It was first published in '82 in an anthology called Terrors. So 3 years before it was collected to the Skeleton Crew. It's a pretty grisly one, right?
Yeah.
And probably, I mean, it's not supernatural horror, it's real life, and probably it felt very far-fetched.
Yeah. Not a whole lot to say that I have. I mean, but yeah, I think you're right. There's just, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, yeah, King did his research and came up with fairly rational reasons why how you get into a situation where you could actually start eating yourself, where this guy is a surgeon and he's got a big bag of heroin, which, acts as anaesthetic, but it was kind of this one's probably the most EC Comics of all of the ones in this collection, right? It's definitely one of those ones where someone turns up at the end and finds a guy sitting on the beach saying, "What? Oh, I wonder what was going to eat next." And in fact, you know what? I think I've read an EC Comic story of this or something very similar. King himself said about this one, I was just sitting around one day and I was wondering thinking about cannibalism and wondering if it was possible for a person to eat himself. And that's where it came from. So it turns out it's this surgeon who is very dodgy, isn't he, this surgeon? He raised himself by his bootstraps pretty much, but and was doing dodgy selling cat prescriptions and all sorts. But from that, we find he's also like transporting drugs too, and that's how this comes out. I kind of like this one. You want to take it with it? Do you think?
No, I think I liked it. I think I was a little bit. Maybe I was trying to read into it a little bit. But what you said about how King came to the conclusion and it being very EC Comics related. See, I didn't really read the EC Comics, but I do know that King is a fan. I mean, I know that he and what's the Night of Living? I'm blanking. Night of Living Dead, the director.
George Romero.
Yeah, sorry. Wow, that was a huge brain blank right there. But that they had teamed up many times to do EC comic related movies, especially with Creepshow. But as for me, like not having that background knowledge, I was kind of like, well, obviously he's addicted to heroin. He's not admitting that. And is it kind of symbolic of someone with an addiction that they're just destroying themselves? He's eating himself alive, that kind of thing. So I think I probably tried to get deeper into it than it was. Because I didn't have that experience that you did. So
yeah, no, I didn't see. I could see where it would be an allegory of that kind of thing, but it was far too grisly to work as any sort of thoughtful thing. It was like, this is gross. He was going for the gross out in this one. There was, I felt there was very little horror or terror. It was gross out, really. It was like, and the guy, as he's going through documenting what his bits of himself is eating and wondered what he could do and wonders how to stop the bleeding, before he dies and all this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And it seems like this. All right, okay. It's one of those, yeah. Okay, let's get on to the next one. Number 17, Uncle Otto's Truck. This was written a couple of years before and put into another collection before it was collected in the Skeleton Crew. One thing that King does actually mention in like footnotes or notes at the end is the truck is real. And so is the house. It's across the road. That vision, that place exists, or it did at the time of this being published. So that's kind of interesting, right? I actually do remember this one quite well. I should have said at the beginning I hadn't read this collection in many years, but this one I remember, but I could never remember the ending. I just remember this impression of like this truck kind of creeping up, kind of thing. This reminded me of an old Night Gallery story. In fact, the very first story in the Night Gallery TV series. Have you seen the Night Gallery at all?
Yeah, long time ago. I watched them here and there, kind of like hodgepodgey, because I was trying to look for something to fill in, because I think I'd seen all of the Twilight Zones, and it's one of those moments after you finish something you really love, it's like you don't know what to do with your life. So I was like trying to find something similar to fill that void, but it was a long time ago, so I can't comment with it, you know.
Let me just fill you in. It's in the very first story in the first episode of Night Gallery. It's Roddy McDowall and Ozzie Davis as a butler. I think he's a butler, and it's about this house where sort of spooky things are supposed to be happening. Roddy McDowall doesn't buy it, but there's this picture of the house. But suddenly, he notices that there seems to be someone emerging from the corn or something, or the woods crossing the way. And every time he goes to the picture, this figure's nearer and nearer. So again, it's a bit like the mezzotint. And this story kind of reminds me of that a little. I like this story. It's vivid. I found it quite vivid. There was a touch of I don't know, Steinbeck's about it in a way. Or more, King's Maine, good old Maine kind of stuff. I haven't got much to say about it. What's your thoughts?
He does like his haunted cars. I mean, so it feels like it was just yet in the genre or the canon of the haunted vehicle. So that was kind of like where I was reading it. And I sort of glossed over this one a bit myself, because that's kind of what I took away from it. It was just the truck is possessed of something, is creeping up on the narrator, and is like, I think the whole point is like it's demanding it needs oil to feed or something like that.
Yeah, it's very it's weird because when I read it, I like I say, I remembered it quite distinctly, but it's a bit not formless. It kind of tails off for me. I think that's the right point. This is probably one of the weaker ones, but I found it quite bizarre. It's one of the ones I found more memorable for some reason. Weird. Right. Okay. Okay. So number 18 is called Morning Deliveries, and also got the subtitle Milkman Number 1.
Yeah.
Now I understand that apparently this and the next story were like taken from an unfinished novel which he intended to put out, called The Milkman. So that might help to elucidate what this story's about. So this is kind of another grisly kind of one, isn't it? There's a milkman happily delivering stuff, but as the story goes, it kind of suddenly drops in that he's like delivering horrible stuff to people, like poison and venomous spiders and stuff. Yeah. But he's going about his rounds. Odd one, right?
Well, I mean, and I think it was one of those things where you kind of see that the line, almost like Survivor type, the line between horror and comedy is very, very thin, because it's so ludicrous. But, because there's times when he drops off something with cyanide in it, and then he stops at the next stop, and it's a family apparently with 2 growing boys. And so pure milk for them, it's like they're 2 growing boys. They need they need their milk. So it's like he's not poisoning everybody. He's just certain people, for some reason or another, he feels need this. Yeah. So
there's not really much to say about this story. It's kind of a bit fun. It could have been in an EC comic. It's got that vibe. One thing of interest is the milkman's name is called Spike Milligan, which is the name of a fairly famous comedy actor in Britain. He's dead now. He was famous in like the 50s and 60s. But still doing stuff into the 70s and 80s. So it's just interesting. I mean, I don't think King, that means nothing. King just picked a name, I guess. Or maybe he heard it and didn't realise it was someone famous in England. But it was kind of interesting that this guy's called Spike Milligan, because that name's fairly well known in this country. Okay, so that brings us to the next story, which is connected, right? Connected to this. Spike Milligan kind of turns up. And the next story, number 19 in this, is Big Wheels, A Tale of the Laundry Game. Also called subtitled Milkman Number 2. First published in 1980 in an anthology called Nude Terrors. And as also, taken from this unfinished novel called The Milkman. I'm kind of intrigued what the hell this novel's about, because a murderous milkman doesn't seem like enough meat to write a story, a novel on.
Yeah.
Does it? So it's about these 2 guys, bit shiftless, really. One wants to get his his car passed for inspection, right? And it sounds like the car's a right wreck. What's they call it? An inspection certification, he calls it. If it runs out at midnight and he needs to get it renewed, and they're kind of driving around drunk, and it's like, and they find a station owned by a friend of, or a past colleague of one of the guys, called Bob. And it doesn't. One of the guys, Rocky, who knows his Bob, actually crashes into his garage. Good start, right? Wow. And this is more like a character thing until the very end, right? It's just like these kind of shiftless guys annoying this Bob, trying to get him to give him the certificate. It was almost like a little play or something. What was your thoughts?
Yeah, a little one-act play, but I mean, now that you said it was probably part of a novel that never got finished, it makes more sense now, because I was reading it sort of like, what? And where are we going with this? And it's like, it wasn't until you got to the end and you see the milkman making an appearance. He's just, so this is like townsfolk going about their business and oblivious to this serial killer who's posing as a milkman. So, I mean, that's kind of, but yeah, I didn't connect with this one at all. It was just kind of on its own. It was a very weak one for me. I kind of like the banter, but it was like, I was with you. It's like, where's this going then? It kind of was fine, and you did get a feel for the characters, in that King way, but it was like, it wasn't really going anywhere, was it? All we find out is, I think one of them mentions that he knows that the guy following them kills people. He's aware that this guy's murderous, which is like, again, but it was like, what? He knows there's a murderous milkman, and didn't this guy do something with his wife? I was a bit unclear anyway. All right, let's move on to the next one. Next one's a much more interesting one, in my opinion. 20 grammar. Yeah. This was actually made into a film which I watched called Mercy, so we'll come on to that in a bit, but this was very solid. First published the year just before, but put into here. This interesting here because there was definitely Lovecraft was definitely present in this one in terms of some of the names of stuff. There's a mention of Hasta in this, which is a Lovecraftian sort of one of those god elder things and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting, I thought. But basically, it is this old lady. It's a boy who's being looked after by his mother, and they find out his brother has broken his leg playing baseball. So it's very, it feels very reminiscent of King's own family life, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And his mother has to go to the city to visit him in hospital, so he has to stay on with his grandma, his mother's mother, who he really doesn't like. Yeah. What's your thoughts on this one? Oh, yeah, this one was fun. I mean, it kind of like initially you're kind of like, well, it kind of plays on the supposed fear that kids have of old people. I mean, it's just because some kids do. I don't think I ever did, but so I guess in a way it may seem a little ageist at first, but it is kind of like this there's something wrong with grandma, and you think it may be just the kid's imagination, but then of course it comes around that the parents and the mom is sort of stuck taking care of grandma because none of her siblings want to do it. So it's just kind of a lot of things start coming into play, and it kind of made me think a little bit of that movie Witches, like with the of course that was a kids movie from a while back, but yeah, the ladies who suddenly turn into, they seem like normal ladies until they shed their skin and turn into witches. And so it's kind of, now she's coming for this was more horror comedy to me. That was how I felt about it. But I don't know if it was supposed to be straight up horror. Maybe it was.
It felt like horror to me, I have to say. I just sort of find horror. I really quite like the child's perspective on this.
Oh, yeah.
The fact we kind of get, he also talks about when he first encountered grandma, he was only 6 and he was quite terrified she wanted to hug him.
Yeah.
And there was that old, I remember there's a line in, I think, King's Dance Macabre. He says, "There's a reason old ladies like to pinch babies' cheeks. They want to see how juicy they are." You know, it's kind of that, wasn't it? There's that kind of idea embedded in this. Basically, he does not like Grandma, and it's kind of it appears that the mother either lives there or they often stay there to look after her. In fact, no, hold on, thinking about it, the mother's there looking after her, right?
Yeah, something like that.
They're kind of paid by the rest of the family to do this. But he's rarely ever left alone with her. So he's waiting for his mother. Time passes. He just wants her to stay asleep. And he starts remembering, stuff he overheard when he was younger. Like the family sort of saying, you need to look after her. You're the only one that can keep her quiet and stuff like that, or calm her down. And they were forced to, because they didn't have much money and they were getting paid by the family, forced to move there basically. Then we also get like comments he's picked up as a child that she was kind of kicked out of the local church. And also dismissed. She was a school teacher and she was dismissed from her position because she had certain books.
Right.
He also there's also stuff about she was. I think it's. I'm trying to remember now because I've got confused a bit with the film. Maybe did she go into these books because she couldn't get pregnant, and there was the book. This knowledge somehow allowed her to conceive and carry a child.
I believe so. Yeah, there was a reason that she starts delving into this, but I think then she becomes very, very into this whole. Apparently, she's a part of a coven of some kind,
right?
And I don't know where the other members of the coven are located, but apparently it's like she's their leader. She's like an elder in the coven. And so she becomes a bit of a menace in the local townsfolk.
Yeah. Yes, the townsfolk are kind of frightened of her, right? That's what it felt. Then he starts remembering other stuff. It's interesting that he's only 11, but we're getting, and it doesn't feel like this is phony at all. He's kind of remembering other stuff like. She says weird words in the night, and his mother gets kind of nervous about it and tries to calm her down by whispering in her ear. And he thinks then at one point, because she's not moving, that she might have died. He doesn't know what to do. He tries to figure out how to check her pulse, and he knows the story of holding a mirror before someone's mouth.
Yeah.
And I often make jokes about this when elderly relatives are sleeping. I say, better go get a mirror. Yeah. I'm terrible, aren't I? And he thinks he's figured out she is dead. But when he tries to use the phone's not working, right? So he realises he just has to wait for his mother. And then he suddenly starts to get frightened that he hasn't covered her face. He figure, he's aware of that sort of cultural thing to do, cover someone's face if they've died.
Right.
So he goes back and he puts the sheet over her face, and then suddenly her hand grabs him, and he runs away. And we get this sense of creeping, growing dread, and something bad's going to happen, right? And then he hears her say, "Come here, Georgie. Grandma wants to give you a hug." Which sounds awful. I really dug this. This was properly creepy, but fun, like you say, fun.
I thought so. I mean, I kind of liked, little things from the little boy's perspective. I mean, very much a child. And just you can imagine being a kid, in a situation where the only adult in the house, and then they're dead, or you think they're dead. And of course, with Grandma, she's obviously in some sort of spell/trance or whatever, but he's, he doesn't know what's going on. And, the whole thing with burying her, it's a sort of a symbolic burying is what he understands as the covering of the face. But yeah, just going forward from there, it picks up steam, it goes full throttle, and it was a lot of fun, right up there to the end.
There was another element I've forgotten. Isn't there a bit where he tries the phone earlier and he's got a party line, so he's listening to other people talk and hoping that they're going to hang up soon in case his mother phones, and then one of them says, "Whoever's listening on here, I hope you're hearing good stuff. And he kind of feels a bit ashamed about it. There's kind of that kind of stuff, which again feels very authentic. That's like you have to have lived in that era to understand that's how things were. And if you never lived in that era, you probably find this quite interesting and would probably add to authenticity for you, perhaps.
Oh yeah, for me, I mean, I have to kind of like put myself back, remember stories that my mom and dad would tell when they were kids coming up, like how you did things. And then you can only imagine how young people are when we say, well, we did this. And,
it's like, oh, it's all right. Ancient, isn't it? And then his Aunt Flo calls and he tells her what's happening. And she says, you've got to get him to lie down. Tell her she has to lie down in the name of Hasta. So in Hasta's name, lie down. And he kind of tries to do this in her ear, and she kind of like wraps her around. I think the phrase is wraps her arms around him. So is it a hug? Is she grabbing? We don't know. And then an hour later, the mother comes home. George is sitting there waiting, explaining Grandma died. His mother kind of is quite scared at this point and said, "Did anything else happen?" And George says, no. Basically, it's implied that the spirit of Grandma is in George now.
Yes, and George's brother's in for a world of hurt.
Yeah, and there's also an implication he's going to strike down Aunt Flo with some sort of spell. And George is grinning, thinking about how he could torture his own brother. Yep. The implication is Grandma's in there and she's evil, right?
Yeah, right.
Enjoyed this one. I thought it was very solid. As I say, there's a film based on this called Mercy, which isn't great. The character of George, as it were, is played by Carl, the guy that plays Carl from The Walking Dead.
Oh, okay.
And he put in a great performance, but there's some weird old stuff in this. It's worth seeing, but it wasn't particularly great. And it really does turn around the story by making him love his grandma and having a really great relationship with his grandma. But otherwise, some of the elements are the same. And there's some other odd things. We kind of see it. She definitely gets into the witchcraft because she can't bear a child properly. So there's all this. But some of the characters are very odd and act weird. Not weird in the sense of they don't feel like authentic characters. They just feel a bit, they're there to perform this function in this film kind of stuff. So not a great film.
Okay.
But worth a watch, probably. Okay. So we both like this one, obviously. The next one was number 21, The Ballad of the Flexible Bullet. Published in a magazine of fantasy and science fiction in the 1984, so a year before this, and put into this. The name actually comes from, in the text, one of the speakers talks about madness being a flexible bullet. It's eventually kills you, can kill you, but how long it takes and how it does it can change, is kind of the idea. Interesting. What do you think of this one?
Lots to unpack with this one. It's kind of a story within a story that's about a story. So there's a lot of, it's a bit convoluted in that regard. And yeah, it kind of, just how this one author is telling an amusing story that he's about to get published, or that he's trying to get published, about a person going mad. And what makes it unique from all the other madness stories is that it's actually funny. Then that's what catches the editor's attention. The editor, of course, being the one who's the narrator of this particular story. So, I
like some of the elements in this. This Thornet, I have to say, this idea of the Thornet, the muse that you have to look after and help you, and like your madness getting such that you're trying to feed your typewriter, put food into your typewriter for the Thornet. Kind of grabbed me, and you started thinking about, wow, I can kind of basically I felt the obsessive nature of the characters really came through well in this story. And I got to a point where I was like, maybe there is such a thing as a Thornet. Well, maybe not quite that far, but it's like, wow, you could kind of see how some writers would get obsessed with their muse being of this kind of thing. And we
Right.
even get a point that the Hornet gets killed by a little kid who can see it as well. It's like, wow, this is so mad. I like this one. It was fairly long compared to the
Yeah.
other ones. It was a novella, really. Yeah, I was wondering if I had a deep, dark question, which is, does King actually have something he calls a Hornet? In his own head, I mean. And we're getting an insight into his creative flow. Is that something that actually exists? Because it felt so, that coherent in the way that madness can sometimes be coherent
Right.
in its own environment. But I don't think that now. It just, while reading it, it felt really, I could kind of see someone going down this route of obsession.
Sure. Then of course you get to the end, and the writer's wife, who's been listening to with her husband all this time at this story, gets there, is like, there are no hornets in your typewriter, are there? And he's like, oh, no. And then of course they shut the door, and you wonder,
Yeah.
maybe, what is who's feeding him ideas for stories, or what is feeding him ideas for stories? How do writers get their stories? I think is maybe where. And of course, this being Stephen King, he takes a very basic concept of this and turns it into like a horror story.
Yeah, a very weird horror story. It's I liked how all the electrical stuff was interfering with the thought processes and stuff like that, and you kind of see that in like tinfoil wearing hat individuals, don't you?
Yes.
This kind of belief system. So that was kind of linked into it, and also the fact that kid with a toy ray gun could kill someone's Hornet,
Right.
it was kind of cool. It engaged me very well, this one. That's probably the most, and I felt it could have not worked at all, because it was kind of ridiculous in places. But his sort of presentation of that obsessive madness worked for me.
Yeah, it did for me too. I mean, it took a while for me to kind of get into this, but it's of course the setting starts up with someone telling a story, and sometimes those setups work for me, and sometimes they don't. And but in this case, it did sort of get in. It took off. It went ahead and took off, and I was able to kind of like want to stay through with it to the end to see how it, how these hornets spoke or whispered to this author. What would actually happen to him. So that was.
Yeah.
I did like that aspect of it.
Okay, let's get on to our next one. The next one, I think it's the last one as well. Let me just check. Yeah, last one on our list is The Reach, number 22, The Reach. It was first published in 1981 in the Yankee under the title Do the Dead Sing, before it was collected into this collection. Interesting one, this. A very, very, coastal community kind of stuff going on here. And I understand it was inspired somewhat by King hearing stories of individuals living their entire life on a little island, never wanting to leave.
Yeah.
And you definitely got that sense of it in this story. This island was called, in the story, was Goat Island, right? Mm-hmm. And she'd never crossed, and the Reach is the expanse between the island and the mainland. And I definitely remember reading another story by King of this kind of community, but it was a collection of stories about like the zombie, the world of the undead from the George Romero kind of thing. And he definitely wrote one about an island that was isolated from the mainland, but was aware of this problem on the mainland and what they had to do to their own dead to keep safe. It was quite a good one. So it kind of reminded me of that story. But to be honest, I don't know which collection that story is in or when I read it or anything. I just remember it was quite a good story. And this one's equally good. I think we get a feel for this community and this woman. It was fairly long for the material, actually. It didn't really cover that much, but kind of liked it. What was your thoughts?
This was a very bittersweet one, for me in particular. And I think, I think we all know each other well enough. And this is, that I can share this particular story. But, my dad passed away a year and a half ago. And one of those things that sort of happens that, you kind of notice when a loved one dies is that you still feel love for them, even though they kind of aren't there to reciprocate it. And it's one of those that's one of the most strangely abstract feelings that I'm sure writers and musicians and artists have tried to capitalize on for ages. But it's, to me, that's what it occurred to me as, is like, do the dead sing, do the dead love. And, this lady, Stella, is she realizes that her end is nearing, and so she wants to have this one last adventure, go out to the Reach and see for herself if if she can make contact with those who've gone before her, mainly her husband, and she does. So apparently the answer to that question is yes, they do. So it was that was kind of, I felt this was probably his one of his deeper stories, especially for this collection. It's one that he definitely tries to make it more human, because as she's walking down the road of Goat Island to get to the Reach, she's passing by all of these people, all of these neighbors that she's known for either all of their life or all of her life, and their individual stories. And so it's definitely a much more, I'm trying to think of an author that this is like as well, because of that particular author who focuses on just life, like the people in a community, like our town, like that kind of story.
Yeah, I was going to say Steinbeck again, but it's similar. But I know what you mean. It's kind of hard to. It definitely reminded me of some biographical kind of biographical stories I've read. Where it's not about a celebrity, it's about just someone telling tales of either childhood or adulthood or something. An example, and this is very, very British, and I don't think it's travelled outside of Britain. There's a very sweet one of a guy telling about growing up in like Somerset, I think it is, or certainly somewhere in the distinctly English countryside, called Cider with Rosie. It had that kind of vibe. Again, authentic and but feeling it. But it also reminded me of other sort of mystery writers. But I can't think of one. I'm like you. I can't think of one specifically where I says, that's like the works of so and so. In many ways, it reminded me of Peter Straub's work, actually.
Oh, okay.
Where he deals with ghosts is a very sort of straightforward, but I think King's a bit more lyrical than him. I mean, Straub's a pretty good writer, but he's fairly matter of fact, and you get the mood from the conversations rather than descriptions and so on. This was like more descriptive as well as the conversations and the thoughts of stuff that had happened. I liked it. It had a touch of nostalgia as well, didn't it, about it? And it was very sweet. And like you said, I think you described it as bittersweet, and I think that's a good description. I think this one, we're getting a feeling of what Maine was like for King, perhaps, as well, right?
Well, I just kind of looked a little bit about the detail of the Reach, and that was kind of part of why I had a screen open, was his brother-in-law worked in the Coast Guard, and there was an actual lady like Stella Flanders who lived and died on a small Maine island, and she never left her island. She had lived her entire life there. So it was just something that stuck with King, and that's, of course, what inspired him to write the story, to come up with the idea of the short story. So apparently these little communities, these little New England communities, there's a lot of them. I have family in New England, and they've got a lot of interesting stories about the quirkiness that we would call quirkiness, that exists in their little communities. So, yeah.
Yeah. I should imagine as I said, I mean, Scotland has many small islands with small communities on. They even have their own little parliaments and stuff, which consists of all the people on the island. So I imagine that's a similar, obviously different, it's a different culture, but not a million miles away from each other, right? And that small island list has its own quirks, I guess, on personality and culture, right? So, I thought it was an interesting. The other thing that I picked up was they used the phrase "do you love" throughout, in quite a different way to how it come up with Nona, I think.
Right.
Maybe not that different, but certainly a different kind of thing involved in that phrase for the people that were heard it. It was interesting that he came back to that phrase. It was kind of sad. I mean, I can definitely see someone reading this and crying. Actually,
yeah.
It could be quite an effective tale if you hear you in the right way, I'm sure. It was kind of gothic in a way, right? And a mood piece, somewhat. I mean, I was thinking of Hemingway, but Hemingway's a little more Spartan in his use of words and phrases than this.
It makes
But
me, yeah, more like Thornton Wilder. Like again, I'm thinking about the our town, and it's pretty much the life of that town through the eyes of its citizens. And I think one of the characters is dead at the beginning of the play. It's been a while, so but yeah, I just kept thinking about those types of, but yeah, it's those types of stories. Yeah.
in terms of something more famous, I'm thinking maybe Cannery Row by Steinbeck, maybe, that
Okay.
kind of thing, perhaps.
Right.
Possibly some of Twain's stories, actually, thinking about it. I'm trying to think, did Twain ever do ghost stories? I'm trying to add that kind of feel.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are the I think 10 or 11 stories and poems we covered. Out of those, what would you say was your least favourite?
Least favorite. I would probably say it was definitely within the. I'm trying to go back to the.
Shall I remind you of some? Would that help?
the list, well, I'm trying to go back to the list of stories to kind of like. I feel like the Uncle Otto's truck again just didn't really resonate with me as well as the second Milkman one. So I guess probably have to gloss over those in particular.
Yeah, I think the second Milkman one is the weakest.
Yeah.
I like the beginning of Uncle Otto's track, but I feel it kind of, it's that,
Right. Exactly.
by the end. Some of them are kind of still effective but grisly, and some of them, I think the last one's the most lyrical, perhaps, of all of them, for sure. What was your favourite?
I think as far in terms of terror and atmosphere, Nona was my favorite.
No. Okay, yeah, that was a very solid one. I kind of like Grandma quite a lot. That was a lot of fun for me. I'm just having a quick scan through because I'm sure. Beach World I found pretty interesting too. I kind of like to read a collection of sci-fi short stories from King just to see if he, how he deals with that. I think it'd be pretty good. So, how do you feel this set compared to the first set from this collection?
For me, I liked this second half best. Maybe because at the time I got to Beach World and then Nona, it was more like again because I enjoyed those stories in particular. I was probably more inclined to like the rest of it. But I just feel like there were more stronger stories in the second half than in the first one, or just more stories that resonated with me in the second half.
Would you say that the what's your favourite? Let's just come out with it. We got to remember the Mist is included in this set as well. What's your favourite out of this collection?
Okay. Out of the entire collection, I would probably have to go with The Reach as my favorite, and then my second favorite is Nona. So
okay, cool. I have to say I think the Mist is my favourite. Out of this collection, but I have to say I really like last time. I think it came across pretty clear last time. I'm a big fan of Mrs. Todd's Shortcut. I just there's something about that story that really appeals to me. But I was also a big fan of The Wedding Gig too. I really like that one. That's very vivid and non-supernatural. I thought that was. But having said that, I think in terms of consistency, I felt that the second half were more consistent. I mean, some of them were grisly, and some of them were this, and some of them were that. I felt Grandma was a solid one, for example. I think it's a very good collection all round. Actually, there's only a couple of ones I thought were particularly weak. The weakest for me was definitely Milkman's Story 2.
Yeah.
That one really didn't work for me in a meaningful way. So good set all round, really. I mean, his short story collections are pretty solid, aren't they? Has to be said.
I do like them, yeah.
Yeah, and they just work. And they show, I think, some of the best and sometimes the worst of King, somewhat. But they're definitely worth a read and a look at. Okay, let's wind it up there. Now, next time I put out a Kingology, it's going to be covering It. So I'm wading through that in the minute, and also the film will be out in a few months, so I'm kind of looking forward to that. So thanks for coming on for these two, Talicia. I hope to have you on again at some point in the future on Kingology. We'll talk about it offline at some point about what ones. I think we already talked about a few, haven't we? We've got a few ideas. For example, I think you and I talked about Gerald's game possibly and stuff like that. So I'm sure you'll be on for those when I get to them. And I promise everyone, once it's over, I'm going to try and go back to monthly releases rather than this rather stretched out one. But you can blame me and you can blame it for that stretching out. Okay. So again, thanks for coming on. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you about this book. Thank you for having me. Enjoyed it. Okay, so bye from me, bye from Talicia. Bye. And until next time on Kingology.